and Kekegitaganing is my home territory, or land of the old gardens, where my traditional village is, and Cortney will be presenting with me, co-presenting with me.
Under coffee. Bonjour. Don't want to lose coffee in the morning, so.
Detention, breakout.
Bonjour. Gitchianakwid kwe, Nagani Ogima kwe, Cortney Indigenous Kas, Ma Wabajeji and Dodem, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Quino Focus Nordathaus, and Italia, Bawating and Ojibwa, Kalamazoo in Norongong. So what I said there is a few of my names. I'm Cortney, but I'm also known as Gitchianakwid kwe, or Great Cloud Woman.
Yeah, it's the first.
I descend from the Wabajeji clan, as well as the Boyd clan from Scotland. So I try to represent all of where I come from. I also said that my descendancy comes from Italy and Scandinavia as well, and that my home territory with the Ojibwe is in Bawating or Sault Ste. Marie area. So I think that's most of it. It's hard when you say that many things. And I live in Kalamazoo, so this is also where I'm at, and it was nice to come out and speak to everybody here. So today, like he said, we're going to talk about wild rice and how it's involved with the state of Michigan, and both kind of the sacred aspects of it and the scientific aspects of it. And for us, the importance of when we introduce ourselves is to speak to all those who are here, and those who will one day be here, and those who were here previously. And so to be respectful of all of everyone and the spirit of everyone. And you can see on the far side of this first slide, we also want to recognize those who taught us directly, not just all those who came before us, but those who taught us directly. I have been learning from Roger for the past 10 or more years. I lose track. So he has been a great teacher in my life. And I also have learned from Donnie Dowd, or Ojoanaquid, who's the very top picture up there. He is a great medicine man and healer and helper of the people. And I have been lucky enough to work with him for many years with plants, and to understand the plants and the spirit of the plants. And so the knowledge that I gained both from him and from Roger is how I'm able to come here today and to speak to you about rice in a respectful and kind way, and knowing that that rice is a family member to me. So I want to acknowledge all of them for helping me to be here.
And then the center one there is my mentor, my uncle, and his name is Naganosh, that one who leads. And so he took the initiative to do the restoration on our home territory, on our lake. And so I've been dealing with or participating in the restoration of wild rice on our homeland since 1972. Naganosh walked on in 1999, so that's when I put out my assignment, asked the Creator to bring me some helpers, and so Cortney came into and stepped on my road, and we've been doing education and outreach for quite a few times. And then the bottom one there is Daisy. She's a Cree woman from way up in Canada, and so she has a lot of stories, and she does a lot of teaching for food and everything. And then Kelly is from Mount Pleasant.
Yes, so it's important that we recognize all those people who are not only teachers of us, but those who then carry on that knowledge. And as we share knowledge with you today, we hope that you carry that information on and do your work to then help the rice. So again, it's very important that we recognize everyone who came before us. And so in the state of Michigan, the Anishinaabe people, our teachings go back to an original treaty, right? There's a lot of treaties, we'll talk about those later. But the original treaty, or the original agreement, is with all of creation, is with the Mother Earth. And water is life, and earth is life, and that is the sacred holder of everything that is here. And it's important that we made that connection and said that as a people, what we're going to do is uphold and take care of all of that. We're going to care for or nurture the life that's been given to us in a respectful and kind way. And the laws that we live by are for everything. It's not only for this regulation or this regulation. The laws that we live by are a kind and loving, respectful way of existence that we were taught and agreed upon with all of the creatures, all of the plants, all of the elements, the fire, the wind. We made that agreement, and it's our responsibility to uphold that every day in our lives. Do you have anything to add to that?
The thing that I guess you need to stress is when Gishi Manoomin made this universe and this earth, these are things that made the universe. And when you talk about the laws of Mother Nature and living in balance, that's what we need to abide by when we live. And that's why, we stress that whatever we do has an impact on all of that. So, we have to be mindful of that whenever we do, and what we do is we have to be doing it in a good way. And so one of the things that I like to always inform everybody is this migration story. And this migration story is about our ancestors several hundred years ago, and actually before Columbus, and how the Three Fires people have come to inhabit this Great Lakes Basin. Because we were not here originally. We were actually up there at the top of the mouth of the St. Lawrence Seaway. And there was a Quay, a woman, who had this dream. And you see that island sitting up there in the middle of the river. She had this vision that she was standing on this turtle and she was facing where that sun sets. And she was just standing there. So she went to the spiritual leaders and wanted to get an interpretation of that dream. And as those spiritual leaders sought an answer to her prayer, we were visited 7 times by prophets. And each time those prophets came, they brought a prophecy. And the first prophecy, we were directed and told that if we didn't leave that area, that we were going to face death and destruction. And so, as a mighty people in our oral history, it says that you could stand up on a high area, and as far as you could see, you could always see the fires of the Three Fires people. So we made our migration to start making our migration that way because of the third prophecy. That third prophecy said we needed to follow that miga shell. That miga shell is, in our Medewan Lodge, is what we hold in our Medewan and actually gives us our life. And that miga is in the rapids and rapid parts of the river. And they said we needed to follow that migas, or that cowrie shell. And we needed to follow that till we come to the place where the food that grows on the water. And that food that grows on the water is Manoomin, that good berry. And so when we came, you can see the trail of that migration, and we ended up here on Madeline Island. And my band is, as we got overcrowded and everything, and we came inland, that's where I come from, is the Lac-Vizir band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians, my ancestors, and all part of this migration. And so one of the things I also like to always mention here is, I'm not sure if you ever heard of that expression, Turtle Island. And so Turtle Island is all of North America. And if you can envision that turtle, where would the heart be? Right here. The largest freshwater, clear water on Mother Earth. feeding Turtle Island and feeding Mother Earth. So that's what I'll share with you today. This story actually is probably about 3 or 4 days in the lodge. So, but that's what I needed to tell you, is that's why we hold it so high, is because of we are here today because of that migration and following those prophecies. So the fact that we're here, we're still here, we've fulfilled those 2 prophecies. So in the treaty rights, we started, as the colonizers came, as early as 1807. And so all of those treaties were very kind of difficult to do, is because the indigenous people, or our people, Three Fires people, one of the things is we couldn't gather or grab a hold of is when those colonizers came, they had this idea of being able to possess, to be able to own. But in our philosophy, we are put here as caretakers of Mother Earth. We do not own Mother Earth. We are supposed to be able to maintain Mother Earth. Our idea is to make Mother Earth better for those 7 generations that are going to follow, so that those 7 generations that are going to follow have what we have today. And so in those treaties, they gave up and allowed those colonizers to come. But one of the things that we fought hard to retain was to hunt, fish, and gather for our subsistence way of living and be able to live in harmony with Mother Earth. And, as these treaties were always done, they were done by the federal government. And so when the states became states, they thought they had the power to and make decisions over the members within their boundaries. And so they tried regulating. It wasn't until actually the 1900s, and in some cases, like for us, we had to go all the way up to the Supreme Court in the 1980s to reaffirm our treaty rights. And the Supreme Court had to tell those states, those federal treaties supersede the powers at a state level. So here's a timeline for, I was talking about our restoration at Naganosh, my mentor, doing, and how wild rice is so important to our communities. When the colonizers first came, we were in good shape at Lac Vieux Desert. But in the 1800s and all the way up into the 1940s, one of the big things that came into Michigan, especially the lower Michigan, is the logging. And so the logging is when I haven't found a milder word than raped the land and gathered all the resources. And when they did it not in a mindful and sacred way. They did everything. They disrupted everything. They put dams in there. They put the infrastructure in. And they destroyed a lot of the native wild rice beds. And so the tribes in Lower Michigan had difficulty. And it was gone for so long that, my friend Barb Barton and I, we've come up with this phrase called environmental amnesia. Because it's been gone for so long, the people didn't recognize it. Not only the colonizers, the people who came, but even the indigenous people. And that was further complicated by the federal government's ways of trying to civilize and assimilate us, and put us into boarding schools. Said we can't speak our language, cut our hair, put us in all familiar clothing and prevented us from doing our things and celebrating our with Mother Nature. But in the 1970s, my grandparents in Naganash had this vision of trying to revive wild rice on our traditional properties. And so when I was introduced into wild ricing for the first time in 1972, the last 2 days we were out at rice camp. We took that rice from a lake in northern Wisconsin and we brought it home and planted it in our traditional lake, our homeland. And in the 80s, when the tribes were going and trying to get a reaffirmation of their hunting and gathering and fishing rights through the treaties, we started working, and like with the Voigt decision in Wisconsin, that's how Gliffwick was formed. It enabled the tribes to actually come up with their own conservation codes and their own self-regulations, and they didn't have to comply with the state regulations because the tribes in the 1842 treaty area go from central or western UP, northern Wisconsin, or eastern Minnesota. So there's 12 tribes that are part of Gliffwick. And so Gliffwick actually assisted in the early stages of the restoration on Lac Vieux des Airs. And then as we started going, we also needed to develop partnerships. So we started developing partnerships with these other agencies. Because one of the things is we weren't federally recognized until 1988. So we didn't have our own reservation. It was only then that we had our own reservation, and the reservation that we got, that we had to put into trust, we didn't have the water or water bodies to do wild rice, so we had to do it on public water. So we had to develop working relationships with these other organizations, and we had to fight I call it WVIC, which is the Wisconsin Valley Improvement Company, who had a dam at the outlet of Lac Vieux des Airs, and Lac Vieux des Airs is the headwaters of the Wisconsin River. And so they had a dam, and up until their lease ran out in 1987, we were in litigation from 1987 to 2002 to get that power company and the court to decide that we had a maximum water level in that flowage so we could grow rice. And so now, in the early years, there was a lot of animosity between the power company, the people that depended on that power, the riparian owners, the lake association. The tribe was, the bad guy. But thankfully today, I've overcome a lot of that, and now, like Lac Vieux des Airs, we partner up and doing our in the spring we put out our fight nets. We get the milk, from the female. We both have hatcheries, and we both restock the lake. And we also they become used to the low water levels and where our rice grows. And so in the 2000s, after the settlement of that lawsuit in 2002, the federal court ordered Wisconsin Valley to allow us a 10-year test period. So from 2002 to 2012, we were doing. Where the court wanted to find out if our claim that lower water levels would give us, our rice beds back, and the WVIC wanted to prove that their unregulated waters did not cause the disappearance of, so we had a 10-year test period. Mm-hmm. And so the Wisconsin Valley for the first 3 years was ordered to pay for the seed for the first 3 years, and then we were not allowed to do anything. It had to propagate on its own and grow for the balance of the test period, which was 7. In our predictions, we predicted that we would have 7 years where we would get 70 acres or more. We accomplished that in 6 years. So the power company said it failed. And it's not the water that caused it, no, you know, not. So we went around until 2002. They took it all the way to the Sixth Circuit Court in Washington, D.C. And the court in Washington, D.C. did not accept their accusation that their long-standing use of that and placement of that dam, we had no right to make those claims and put that restrictions on their permit or license. So it was then after 2002, we have what we call a adaptive management plan, and we meet on an annual basis with all the stakeholders, all of these agencies and more, whoever have an interest in that lake, meet on an annual basis to determine, about the rights beds. And then recently in November, the state of Michigan, something that I've been advocating for going all the way back to 2002, when the riparian owners, I shouldn't say it like that. What I will say is during our project, we witnessed vandalism done by people who did not want us to succeed. And so when we tried to prosecute them, we come to find out wild rice wasn't even recognized. Wasn't even recognized as a natural important resource in the state of Michigan. The only thing that we could do was we had our partner, the U.S. Forest Service, cite them for malicious destruction of a resource. It was a $100 fine, a slap on the wrist, and said don't do it no more. So ever since 2003, I was advocating that wild rice get some kind of protection. And it happened in November.
Congratulations. That's huge.
And I got more than I asked for. I don't know what it means. I just wanted it to have, because it would enable us to do some regulations and everything once it was recognized. So in November it was recognized and named as the Michigan State Native Grain. So now we have to work. We got our work before us. Who's gonna be the enforcement? Who's gonna regulate? Who's gonna do all this stuff in cooperation with the tribe? So the future of wild rice, and that's kind of why we're here, is to help share this information and why it's so important to the habitat, and to ask you to search within yourselves, what could I do to bring Manoomin back that was once dominant over the state?
Okay, so within those restoration efforts, I did just want to highlight a little bit some of the things that had been done to bring the rice back, because it's not necessarily a crop, but it does have areas in which it grows. And over the years, there's been different types of restoration that's been tried. So seed storage, people have found various different ways to be able to store the seeds over wintering them. There's some benefits to that, and there's also not. So that's kind of still something that people are experimenting with and figuring out what works best. My personal opinion is that it works best to just let it be in the dirt, because that's where it wants to overwinter and then come back up and do a fresh seeding in the fall. But there are people still working on different ways of doing that. For the seed planting, it does happen in the fall. It's a fall planting activity, so it's something that does require the seeds to be fairly fresh in order to do that, is what we have found out. You can't have seeds that have been sitting out or dried in order to then be seeded again. They have to, because it's a water plant, they've got to be fairly fresh from a close by area and be able to be planted that way. And then there's hand pulling that was done of other, removing other plant species that have a tendency to kind of take over. There are invasive plants, as we all know, which are just ones that grow faster and push everybody out, right? It's kind of, they came from somewhere else. And that's just what happens. So there's been hand pulling, because you don't want to really use a lot of the herbicides or things like that in the water. That affects so many other things and can be very detrimental to all of the plant life, the bugs, like down into the soil beneath the water. But things like Phragmites or other such plants they need the same habitat. So they will push out the rice faster, because that rice does need more space and time to grow. So there has been some success with pulling out the other species. And then seed protection zones was done a little bit early on, and it was more like kind of keeping the herbivores out who were going to eat it as it was coming up, to give it a safe place to kind of be. That's not really the best practice anymore. We don't really do that so much. Now more with protection areas, it's more about having recognized waterways that protect the rice.
What are the herbivores that like that?
That's a really good question. Who gets into the water? Off the top of my head.
Beavers?
Cool.
Yeah, like muskrats and
Yeah.
beavers and the birds also. Like, it's like you can't really protect because they're flying unless you put it over, which didn't happen. We just did it low. What else? What other herbivores are going to eat the?
Well, you have not so much those, but the winged ones, the migratory birds. The other importance is that it maintains, I think we'll talk about it, it helps maintain water quality by removing nutrients from the water. That's why it grows at where it does dominate in any given lake. But the four-legged ones eat it as well.
Yeah, and it does grow fairly close to the shoreline.
And that's
it
why
can spread out, but
that's
can
why
get to it.
even Western science, where this rice is present in that habitat, they call it a keystone species, the driver of that habitat, because what it provides to all those other spirit beings.
which is what makes it hard to protect it from being eaten, right? It's
Sometimes
'cause-
the eating actually spreads it, yada, yada.
yeah,
But
it was
when
more
you-
oh, sorry.
When you do that, I mean, one of the things like Gliffwick right now, the tribes have agreed to help do that. They now have permissions to harvest some of those, which is, for example, like the whooping crane. We also now we can actually hunt. I mean, we have a bag limit, but we can do the trumpeter swans. We've increased our bag limit for geese, and we've increased our bag limit for ducks. Those are the ones that feast on it. But one of the things we have to be mindful of, that wild rice is not ours. It was put there for all of the beings in that keystone species. So we have to be mindful, and that when we go out and harvest, you know, when you're doing it in a good way, you only go out and get the ripe rice. You leave the unripe rice to grow, because you got to share that for the people who come behind you and the other spirit beings that count on that for their way of life as well.
Which again is why it's not best practice anymore. You know, like it was really implemented initially to try and protect the young plants that were coming up, so they had a chance to grow into maturity. But those are just some of the different techniques that were used.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
I'm a little confused about the plant cycle. I don't know enough about it. You mentioned that it
Yeah.
starts growing in the fall, which is a little confusing to me. Okay.
I love that you asked that question right now, because we're going to answer that. So, which not everybody's seen a rice plant, right? So not everybody knows what it is or how it grows. So that's a picture right there of wild rice. And
Go back once.
oh, go back one. Whoop.
This is one of those plants, I'm not sure if you're a botanist or not, but this picture is of the male flower, and this is when it's pollinated. But you'll look at, on that one there, that's the female is at the top, and that's where the seed head is, and that's actually what you harvest for wild rice. But this picture is taken in July, and so these plants they don't self-pollinate because the male is below the female. I think we have a picture where I'll show you the real small flower that the female has. But this is one of the things a few times I think that the male outshines that the other part.
Ask a question on that. So if it's below, then how does it, what's the process of pollinating?
The number, there are the pollinators, there are the bees, there are the moths, there are the spiders, but the number one pollen is one of those precious 4 elements, the wind. Like you see those pictures of wheat growing, flowing in the grain. So when the wind blows, it bends that plant over.
It pollinates a neighbor.
It pollinates the neighbor.
Yeah. So there are 2 different species. I love how inquisitive you guys are because it's coming. But so there are 2 different species of the wild rice. There's Zizinia aquatica and Zizinia palustris. One is the river rice and the lake rice, and they do vary in size is one of the main differences that you can see. One is extremely tall and sometimes needs hooks to be brought down. The other is going to be shorter where you can just use a ricing stick, which you'll see those later. But the main thing to know is one's in the lake, one's in the river. They've adapted to different habitats. And then like Roger said earlier, it is the good berry. That's how we refer to it. The thing that I love about languages that are older. The English language is a little bit of a Creole where we label stuff so we can both point at it and go this thing, right? It's not really a great descriptive language, but for the Anishinaabe language, it's very old and it's very descriptive to tell you the value of what you're looking at. So it is the good berry, meaning, one, it's good for you, but the berry, there's a lot of teachings about berries as well. So there's extra value put into that. And then realizing, too, that it is healthy. It is good for you. It helps your body. And it's an aquatic grass. It's full of proteins and fats, and we'll go into the nutrient value of it in a second. But the thing to understand is that when we speak about it, we are explaining its value to you just by telling you the name of it. And not all languages function that way.
So one of the things that I want to notice is this is a very good rice bed for, it goes up and down. But you can see here, if you walked up to the lake and you looked out here, what would this look like to you?
Grass.
Like a field, would it not? But the field grows on water. And so you can see how it can be pollinated.
And the picture below is actually after it's been harvested and then parched, so that's what gives it that kind of golden color. But those are the individual rice inside their own hull. And we'll show you what that looks like after we tell you the nutrient value. So we just did a small comparison here. I think Roger does have some handouts if you would like to take one. We compared white rice, brown rice, and wild rice. Now there are so many other types of rice, but this was just a glimpse of different ones. On most of these, dietary fiber, protein, you can see the differences. You're getting 2% here, you're getting 11% here. The value here is much higher. On a few of them, the brown rice, it's got more thiamine in it, right? But on most, you can see the percentages for that wild rice is up in comparison to the white and the brown rice. And the thing I want to explain about that is this rice is adapted to this land and the people here. So the value it brings is to the people here. And it has adapted to be beneficial to the bodies of those who live on this land. So that's what it's going to give you. Now, we live in a time where I can get purple rice from Thailand. I can get red rice from China. I can do that. I can trade. The value is going to be different because it's for a different land. It has adapted to a different people. And for a lot of us, I'm a descendant of many places. I like lots of rice, and I need different values of nutrients in my body, right? But the people who this is their land, this is their rice. It has adapted for those who live here. And if you're from somewhere else and you now live here, guess what? Your body's only been here. Unless you've lived in Europe. But your body's only been here. So it has adapted to help you as well. So the nutrient value, it's not just about it being higher. It's about being an enrichment for your body because you live here. So being respectful of that, not only as an indigenous person here, but as a visitor here, or someone who is descended elsewhere but now lives here, this is going to give you your higher nutrient value and should be protected as such.
So the graph, one of the things on the graph tells you why some of the ones are so important. But I like this graph because when you look at that graph, it's not easy to determine what advantages the wild rice has over the rest of them. But if you look at that, those green lines, how many of those green lines supersede and go further than the other two forms of rice? And up here it tells you why those things are so important and why it kind of helped prevent disease, and it was important to the indigenous people before those colonizers came, because we didn't have hospitals.
I think one of the most incredible things that just jumped out at me is the folate levels and the zinc levels, which are critical for healthy pregnancy and fetal development. And so it's phenomenal to see that the wild rice has great nutritional value, but also like just kind of reflecting on the history of the crop going away and eliminating a powerful food source for people is a structure of colonization. That's wild.
On the fiber too. Fiber is
I think
super
fiber's
important
great,
for
but
your, well, for
folate
cancer
and
and things
zinc
like
and-
that.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can see the health of the people and the health of the land go hand in hand. So the more we destroy the land, the more we get sick all the time.
Make it make
The,
sense.
yeah, the more we have disease that runs through the people is because we are destroying the land that we are on, which is why it's so important that we protect the land. If we protect the land, we again protect for the next 7 generations. We are trying to guarantee that the world is either better or just as good as what we have it for those who are coming. It's not ours.
7 generations? Why do you say 7?
That was the prophecies is what that's one of the laws of nature is that we try to protect it, and that's one of the reasons that we're opposed to GMO or hybridized rice, in restoration efforts, is we try to identify and try to get native rice to do our restoration projects, because one of the other things is when you start dealing with that, you have that potential of those people who provide those seed as trying to put a tag and ownership on that rice. And that is not our intent. It's got to remain natural. It's got to remain wild. It doesn't need, all of these things are dependent on a lot of things. That Manoomin has a spirit of his own. When we go out in the spring of the year, we offer, because Manoomin is an annual plant. It's not a perennial plant. Each plant has a 1-year life cycle. Each year we have to go out and we have to petition all those beings. We have to petition that sun. We have to petition the water to provide for it, the wind to pollinate it. We have to petition Mother Earth to give it the nutrients to grow. We have to ask that water to be gentle on it and to protect it. Because, it's not like that ball field, build it, it'll come. We have to go out and we have to honor and respect all of that in the spring and ask for him to have pity on us. When I go out, I pray. I said, have pity on it. And as I go out during the growing season, I offer my petition and respectfully ask for permission and tell him why I'm there. Then when I go out and harvest, I offer up my tobacco, my petition, and again, announce who I am, thanking them for what they are about to sacrifice and give up for me. You know, so it's all year round that we do these things. And so here is the life cycle, and it has actually the 4 stages. Again, 7 and 4s are in a lot of our teachings, but the germination stage. So actually, the wild rice life begins opposite of what a lot of the farmers do in the spring, planting their seed. It's when we harvest it after it's mature. You know, we allow it to go back into the sediment, and it goes through the germination, and it requires 90 days of 39-degree or colder weather for it to germinate under the ice. And so that's the germination. So right after ice out, we go into the submerged stage. So as soon as that ice leaves and that water is clear and it receives that energy from that grandfather's sun, it starts to grow. So that's the submerged stage. Then it goes up into the floating leaf stage. And so at this point, it goes from an anaerobic plant to an aerobic plant. And then actually the floating leaf stage starts to initiate that photosynthesis as it grows. At this point, this floating leaf they only have one small, basically taproot, so that it can grow this. Once it does this, it starts putting this secondary root system that would enable this to take off. So this is the aerial portion of it. And again, here's the tiller, here's the male flower, and there's the seed head, the female.
So what I said at the beginning or on our very first slide is that water is life and rice is how we live it. So it's funny that you mentioned the health of giving birth. So these are the stages. Like he was saying, it starts when it goes back in, when we're harvesting. This goes down to underneath the water. It emerges out and then matures. So rice is not just a plant. Rice is a teacher. Rice is someone who shows us how to live. And the seeds, as you saw, is a long head with a tail. That's our seeds. That's how we grow. That's where we come from. So it immediately is mirroring to show how to live a good life, how life is made. And life comes from water. Then that floating leaf stage. This is a very, very sensitive time, as is this, because your little leaf is floating, right? It's a very sensitive time. You're going to be very gentle, right? You're not going to agitate. You're not going to hit this. So don't go through here with a paddle. You're hitting it like you're hitting a baby. That's sacred life in the water. Then this little life comes out of the water. It breathes for the first time in the air. The rice does the same thing. And again, it needs to be protected at this time. You're not taking this little one and going, here, go, right? That little one needs to be cared for. It needs to be held. It needs to be nurtured. Same thing here. You can't go through here with paddles. You can't go through here knocking things down. You can't be swimming through here. You have to just give it the space. Protect it and give it space. Care for it. Then, just for fun, as the plant grows, it matures. But it matures with both male and female parts. Because there is balance to all things. And in us, we have both masculine and feminine. This is our balance. When I am balanced and I am in my core, where I have my male and my female, where I have everything in alignment, then I can reach out to somebody else who's also in alignment, and I can create life. Right? But I can't do it before I mature and find that balance within myself. That's the healing of the self. That's the good life. So wild rice, yes, is a food. Yes, is a plant, but is our family who reminds us how to live life. And that's one of the reasons it's a very sacred plant to us, a sacred being, a sacred family member. Because when we forget, it's there to remind us how to live. So speaking of how to live, I broke down, this is kingdom, phylum, class, order, into family. And I want to emphasize family. Because we are all family. Every single race, from every different place, is all under the same family. Again, a reminder how to live. We are family. So being respectful of the fact that we are all family from wherever we come, we should treat each other accordingly. And that goes for the plants, right? That goes for all things. And like I said, there are many different genus species, right? We all look different. There are many different breakups of how we can look, how we can be, how rice can look, how rice can be. Has different values. We all bring something different to the table. As you saw in the nutrient list, we all bring something different, and those things are important. But when we focus on the fact that rice is a reminder of how we should live as people, it reminds us how to be on the land. And all of us at one point lived by looking around and respecting what we saw. So getting back to that and remembering that. The rice that's in the Great Lakes region, there's these two here are both wild rice. They come from different areas. So even coming from different lakes, your nutrient value is different. Who you are is different. Both delicious. All delicious, to be honest, depending on what you're making. I don't want this in my sushi, right? Like this I want in my sushi. So like all good. But remembering that the rice teaches us more than just about life cycles and plants and waterways. It teaches us about us and how to do our own healing and how to walk on the land gently.
The importance of wild rice in the ecosystem, and I mean this actually can tell you, why it's a keystone species, and why it's so important, and it was so important to us in our subsistence way of living. You know, when we made that migration story, one of the things is even today. Probably 98% of the reservations where they're located, in the treaty areas, where do you think they're located? They're located near or on a wild rice bed. And that was because of the subsistence living. They could live year-round, not only for harvesting the rice in the fall, but the other thing is, all the other things that we had, whether it be the beaver, whether it be the muskrat, whether it be the deer, whether it be the duck, whether it be the fish, because the plant systems and everything, like when it's in that field, makes an excellent nursery for the nursery, for the young fish, for the fry and the fingerlings. But when you in the spring of the year, like around where the rice beds are, you'll find all those musky fishermen and all those other ones. So all those boats are almost lined up on the edge of that rice bed. Because what they're after the predator fish that are looking at, are waiting for them guys to make that mistake that come out of that rice bed. Mm-hmm. But you can see on here where it is important to, a lot of them. I mean, like even the rice worms, when the moth, the larvae of that moth, I mean, that's excellent food for the fish. But the fish have their own needs for protection and everything else, but like I was talking about, we learned that, we can't be greedy. We go by that philosophy, we take what we need, because that wild rice was not put here, even though we were to search for it in the prophecy. It was not for us alone. It was for us to share. We only take what we need. So a lot of those things are, and the roots, like I said, maintain that water clarity. It takes the nutrients out of the water. It takes out and filters out a lot of the things that float in the water. That's where it actually gets that. And so that's when it filtrates it, filters it out, and actually it keeps that from algal blooms. And so one of the important things is, and why wild rice disappeared from the state of Michigan, was because the state of Michigan, when we, in the early 1800s, when we had that malaria come into the area, what did the state of Michigan do?
Drain the swamps.
They dewatered. They ran ditches. I mean, you go through lower Michigan, you can see those ditches where they dewatered it because they didn't know.
Is that the water held it, the malaria? Carried it? Okay.
Well,
So-
they didn't know that it did, but they thought
But
that the air
then they-
carried it, but they thought, yeah.
Yeah, they just knew that malaria was more dominant in wetlands, so they attributed malaria to the wetlands. And then they found out when the vector was the mosquito, then they realized that they messed up.
A little too late.
Ouch.
So, I mean, so there were a lot of things that happened that, caused it. I mean, even when we were doing the logging, the dredging all along the coastal regions, how did you get the lumber from inland out to the harbors? Roads, railways, railroad systems, cutting off the natural flow, disturbing the natural flow. So a lot of those things had an impact on the disturbance of wild rice.
So we gotta get through these. So there are some current issues and concerns for the wild rice. One of the biggest issues for almost all crops is going to be climate change and how that is affecting almost everything. But like Roger was talking about earlier, is the water changes, level changes. The water quality, although the rice can help with it, if your water is so poor, the rice cannot be there. Again, that's why it's a keystone species. If you have it there, something's going well in your water and you want to maintain that. Like I said, with the climate change, it's more because, like I said, or like he said, it's the wind that pollinates. So if we're getting a lot of extreme storms, we're getting stuff it's knocking all those seeds down and it can't be used and then it can't grow. So the storms and droughts and even the fungal and bacterial things that are happening in the water, because in the state of Michigan, we love to destroy our water for whatever reason, that is a huge issue. The clarity of the water also affects it, but like I was saying with that life, recreational vehicles are going through. You've got like motorboats, you've got all kinds of stuff going through the rice beds, which is causing damage to that sacred life that needs to be cared for. So just, education for people who have such things, I think would help prevent that. The aquatic invasive species that we touched on, and then just human issue. A lot of things are human issue, let's be honest. We're the ones doing a lot of it. But like trying to cultivate or modify or, trying to create rice. If you go to like Sewalls or something, you can get wild rice. It's not from here. Check the label, it's from a paddy in California. So we want to make sure that we are protecting the habitat that our wild rice grows in, that's not a paddy rice or a modified rice.
I just want to say something too, is like, there's a lot of difference between the hand harvested and hand processed by, people, as opposed to some of these other people that cultivate the rice. And so, when you see wild rice, 3 pounds for $9.99, that's cultivated rice, and it probably came from California. But like most people in agriculture and growing things, what do? What is your goal? Profit. And so how do you do that? What do you treat your plants with? herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, fertilizers. Those are what are used on those fields or ponds in California. What do you think it does to that plant? So you take that up. It's a lot different than a wild rice that we do. And actually, when they harvest it, they harvest it all at once. So they have to go through they put it into a process where they kind of roll it and let it ferment so that it gets to the right stage. Because what's going to happen if you went out to a strawberry farm and you wanted to make it a quick day, so you went down this road and you picked every strawberry, whether it was white, green, pink, red, or overripe. And you took it home and had a jam, made a jam. What kind of a jam do you think you'd have? You only want the red one, right? That's when you go out in the strawberry, that's what you pick. That's basically what we do in a mindful and respectful way when we go out to the rice bed. We gently knock it just to get the rice. Not like those guys over there, they drain the field, going through there with a thrasher, go through, pick it up, so, and do that, but then it has a high chance, and most likely, some pesticide, herbicide, whatever, in it.
And it has damage. It's like emotionally damaged when a machine goes through there, so let's talk about that. But we only have a little bit more time left, so we're going to touch on this. So community and education and outreach is why we are here today. That's one of our main things, is we want you to share the information. And community is everybody, right? Because we're all family. So rice has just a wonderful ability of bringing people together. And we do rice camps at least once a year, but usually a couple, where people from all over can come from different communities to meet up with one another, to talk, to be friends, to learn about one another. It's an opportunity to get people together, and it's all based around the rice. Without the rice, we don't have that thing that brings us all together from different places. And it also allows us to work together and to know what it is to combine and be a team and to be helpful and have the experience of, the little ones all the way up to the elders. This is one of our most important connections here. And as people here, we're supposed to be facilitating this. They need each other, and we need to keep them together. So these are our responsibilities, and this is what we love to do because it brings everyone together.
So here's some ways that you can find more out on wild rice. Barb is from Lansing, and she actually goes around and does some talks too. But she kind of explains the history of wild rice, more particularly why it disappeared in Michigan. We also have a Michigan Wild Rice Coalition. I co-chair that. We also have, I think the Michigan Wild Rice Initiative is, should be here.
Sorry
next
about
way.
the spacing when I downloaded it. A few things got a little wonky.
So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit, I think, about that in a minute.
Yep.
In the Native Wild Rice Coalition. But some of those things you can actually just go on YouTube and Google wild rice, or Google me.
Yeah, and on this bottom one here, this is actually my website, but I have a compilation of all the videos that we've done together if you just want easy access to them. So you can find that way. And now we can
And so one of the things that in my fight to get a status for wild rice, I started, like I said, in 2002. And then I wasn't getting anywhere, so then in 2015, the Office of Great Lakes, before they combined with the DEQ to become EAGLE, they came out with a 30-year water plan, and they wanted the tribes to support it. When I read that plan, the tribes were mentioned in it once, and wild rice was mentioned in it twice in a 65-page document. I said, we can't approve this. We can't give our staff of approval. And so it gave me an opportunity to fight for addressing the issues of Manoomin in the state of Michigan. And so the Michigan Wild Rice Initiative was formed in 2017. And so Here is the two co-chairs. Here, this lady is the liaison in Eagle, and then Frank is a biologist up at KB. But the initiative has delegates from each and every tribe and a lot of the state and federal agencies, and we are in the final stages of getting a stewardship plan. So the stewardship plan is a kind of a plan on a consensus, and in that stewardship plan, it was taking us a year to do it, but in that, since we started that, Wild Rice has accomplished the #1 priority in that stewardship plan, getting the status. But in that stewardship plan, there's other issues that we're going to be addressing. Do we have one with the subcommittees on it?
No, I don't think we do
Oh,
that in this
okay.
one. We do too many presentations, so we try to change them up for you guys. No, this is all we have. So if you want to get a hold of us, thank you so much for having us here today. We love the opportunity to share our knowledge, and we hope that you do the same.
And I don't know if we have any time left for any questions.
We talk a lot, it's a problem.
If you want to stay, stay or speak. Go ahead.
Oh, we are, and actually,
Yeah.
we're going to have a booth down there by the registration desk. We're going to hand out some information. It's right across, or almost across from the registration.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be bringing some stuff that we'll put out there for handouts. I got a couple posters, I got some things, so stop by.